rub, 1 tablespoon kosher salt, 1 teaspoon coarsely ground black pepper, 2 teaspoons chili powder, 1/4 teaspoon dried oregano, 1 teaspoon ground cumin, and 1/4 teaspoon ground red pepper. And for the meat, you will need a 3.5 pounds top sirloin, approximately 2 inches thick. The first thing we're going to do is combine all those spices and then rub them into the meat. This is such an easy recipe, and I think that's combined well enough. I'll use my fingers to do the rest. The meat should be done in a flat glass dish, and this is, you can see, a 2-inch sirloin, and we have taken off all of the fat. Now, if there's any fat at all left on the sides, like here, you would want to take a knife and slice it, and that way it won't curl up while it's broiling. Then turn it over and rub the mixture into the other side of the meat. This recipe came to me from Texas, and this is where I discovered that it was very impolite to ask a Texan rancher how many acres of land he owns. That would be the equivalent of asking how much money he had in his savings account. Down there, their acreage runs in the thousands of acres. So, if you're invited to a Texas barbecue, mind your tongue. And what these folk call a barbecue, we would call a cookout. Again, be sure that you use a glass dish for this so the spices don't interact with the metal of the pan. Cover lightly with plastic and refrigerate overnight, or even longer. Then, remove it from the refrigerator about 2 hours before grilling, because you want to bring this to room temperature. And heat your grill according to manufacturer's directions. But I do think it's important that you let the grill heat a long time. Then, grill the steak about 6 inches from the heat. 25 minutes for rare, 30 minutes for medium rare, turning once. And we have done ours in the oven today, and I'm telling you, it has just driven everybody crazy because it is so delightfully fragrant. And they're already lining up for sandwiches out in the hall. Look at this. Isn't that great? Sirloin steak can't be beat. There's 2 ways to test its doneness. The most reliable way would be to use a thermometer and insert it, and it's perfect, medium rare. As you become more experienced, you'll be able to pat it with a fork like this. And the softer the meat, the more rare it is. The firmer the meat, the more well done it is. Now to serve this, slice it thinly and transfer it to a warmed platter, and that's important. This chili rub makes the ordinary grilled steak a truly first-rate experience. The ingredients are few, but the flavor is mighty. And be sure to praise the person who does the grilling. Now, a luscious salad that I'd like to suggest that we could make in advance would be the sauteed squash salad with basil and mint. This attractive and very different summer salad is sauteed rounds of yellow and green summer squash. Then it's seasoned with basil, mint, and garlic, and a touch of balsamic vinegar for piquancy. Here are the ingredients: 4 medium zucchini, 4 medium yellow squash, about 1/2 cup of olive oil, 1 small onion, peeled, sliced, separated into rings, 1/2 cup small fresh basil leaves, 1/4 cup small mint leaves, 3 finely minced cloves of garlic, black pepper to taste, and 3 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar. Now we have the squash here that we're going to use in the recipe, and as you can see, they're very small squash. Actually, the big ones, you just should throw them away. They have terrible flavor and terrible texture. This would be what I would consider the ideal size. This is a takeoff, I would say, of the original big yellow crookneck that you can dip into flour and then saute in butter, but the small size is lovely. Wash these, take off the ends, but do not peel, because there's really a great deal of flavor in these skins. And then slice them about 1/4 inch thick. Oh, these are really nice. They don't have a seed in them. They're so tender. Then heat, in the beginning, 3 tablespoons of oil in the electric skillet to about 350 degrees. And you're going to want to add the squash in batches. And don't crowd, because you want to give it plenty of cooking surface. And then cook them until they're golden brown, about 3 minutes on each side, adding more olive oil if necessary. Then you want to transfer this cooked squash either with a slotted spoon, or you can use a fork like this, to a paper towel to drain. And that's important because you're going to use quite a bit of olive oil in here, which is a healthy oil, but we don't want too many calories. Then transfer the squash to a very large serving platter, alternating the green and yellow slices. Isn't this just gorgeous? I love it, I love it. I've got some yellow squash here. And we are doing it on a round platter, which we think is effective, but that's sort of up to you. This looks pretty on most things. And then you put in these onion rings alternately with the mint and the basil, and then top it off with this lovely basil cluster here in the center for real drama. Now, we're going to make the sauce. Come here, Mr. Basil. Do your thing this morning, if you please. All right. In a small bowl, combine the garlic, the balsamic vinegar, and that's 3 tablespoons. We're going to guess here, 1, 2, 3, and pepper to taste. And then we're going to arrange this, because you want to get the garlic spread evenly over the top of the squash, like this. And make sure that that is indeed evenly distributed if you can. Now, the squash falls into 2 categories, summer squash and winter squash. Summer squash, such as these, have really thin skins, and they're very, very perishable. Winter squash, such as the familiar acorn and the butternut, are very hard-skinned, and they're low in moisture. Let me get that onion back there. And they keep a long time. Both kinds of squash are filled with vitamins and can be prepared in a number of low-calorie ways. Now, there we are. You can see how nice this is. Now, cover this very lightly with plastic wrap and allow it to stand for at least 1 hour. And if you do make it early in the day and refrigerate it, bring it to room temperature before serving. Actually, this looks like a piece of art, I think. Tastes like one, too. This is a great salad, unusual, flavorful, and beautiful, and one of the few salads that can be made in advance. Now, another vegetable you might like to serve with a steak would be Pennsylvania Dutch dried corn. This is one of those special old recipes that came out of a time when it was easier to dry food than to preserve it any other way. And there are many versions of this recipe, all quite good. The drying seems to intensify the sweetness of the corn. Here are the ingredients for the dried corn. 2 dozen very large ears of fresh sweet corn. You will need 16 cups of corn cut off the ear. 1 1/2 cups of sugar. 2 cups, half and half. And 1/4 teaspoon coarse salt, not iodized, and you could use kosher, of course. Now, we're just going to do a half a recipe today, for this really makes quite a bit, at least before it's dried. Cut the corn off the cob and transfer it to a heavy, large kettle, and then add the sugar, which is granulated, and I would not use any brown sugar at all in this, and the half and half. Ooh, doesn't this sound good already? Do keep this in mind in August when the sweet corn is at its peak, and the salt. And this, of course, a kosher salt is additive-free, and it's very coarse. And a lot of cooks just cook with that alone. Then stir this to combine, and then bring the mixture to a boil on the stove. But reduce the heat to low immediately, and simmer this uncovered for 20 minutes. Now, if the liquid has not all been absorbed, raise the heat to medium-high, and watching it carefully so it doesn't burn, cook and stir until the cream has evaporated. You don't want it to brown. And when it begins to sizzle, hear that? You should remove the pan from the heat. Now, the time it's going to take to simmer this down and to have all the cream absorbed will depend on the age of the corn and the type of pot and all sorts of variables like that. You're dealing with Mother Nature here. Now, we're going to divide the corn between 2 jelly roll pans. Since we're using just a half a recipe, we're just using 1 pan, of course. I'm sure you could figure that out. And then spread this evenly out on the pans. See how dark it's getting already? Almost caramely looking, and that's perfectly all right. Now, you're going to want to bake this at 200 degrees, and the original recipe said for 18 to 24 hours. Now, I have never had to bake this for 24 hours. Again, that's just one of those variables. Some people actually cook this in the oven with the temperatures on, with the oven door open. Now, stir it occasionally during baking about every 3 or 4 hours to keep it from sticking together and from sticking to the pan. I shall repeat my old mantra: the length of time it takes to dry out depends on the amount of rainfall that we've had this year, the age of the corn. Now, this corn is going to turn a wonderful golden brown, and it's going to rattle when it's finished. This is one of those recipes that we have done totally by sound, underscoring my theory that you use all of your senses when you cook. Listen to the rattle. I have to use this or I'll burn my hands. Here, that means it's completely dried. The dried corn resembles a very pale brownish grape nut, and it's very sweet, almost like a corn cereal. It's good to eat like this, really. I have to tell you that it kept disappearing as we were testing. Now, let this cool completely and transfer it to a recycled coffee can or to plastic containers and store them in a dark, dry place. Now, if your cupboards might not be cool enough, freeze this without a qualm. Now, for the second part of the recipe. To eat this, it's necessary to put the water back in it. You have to soak the dried corn in the water before cooking. And to prepare the corn for a meal, allow 1/2 cup of the dried corn per person and place it in a medium saucepan. And cover it completely with water and let it stand for 4 hours. Drain off any of the excess water, heat it gently, adding butter, salt, and pepper to taste, and you have a superb vegetable. This very old family recipe came to me from Marjorie Meyer of the Teeter House, a very fine bread and breakfast in Hagerstown, Indiana.